Hello and welcome. My name is Zateo, and today we're going to be doing another on-the-fly review. Today we're going to be looking at SkyFire as he plays Air from the backline on Supreme Strait. Oops, let's put it on player view. All right, there we go. All right, let's get into it. So overall, I think SkyFire had some questions about trying to end the game sooner or trying to have some kind of big brain play to end the game instead of having it turn into such a slugfest. I will say, even before this gets started, that's pretty common for Supreme Strait, and that's mainly because this is just so choky. You know, basically any ground units need to push directly through this small area, and this is, you know, when 8 people are trying to push through here, it's kind of hard to do that. So it does turn into a slugfest. I see some tic-tac-toe going on, a little bit of drawing, air, pew pew, kapow. Very nice. Pretty standard procedure. Do some quick drawing while you're just queued up for the game to start. Let's see here. So right away, you know, I like to point out economy tips and tricks before anything else because those are often the fundamental building blocks of the entire match. You know, so doing that right is pretty important. And here I'll note that you don't really need both of these before your third mechs. And so you could get a little bit more metal out of this if you rearrange this a little bit. Notes these mexes are a little bit further away, so you won't actually stall if you try to build 3 in a row. But if you try to build something like a wind directly afterwards, then you will stall. But if you are choosing to go for a solar, you could actually get the solar after the 3 winds, or I'm sorry, after the 3 metal, and then add on another winds or 2 to start your lab with. You don't really need 2 energy buildings before your third mechs. And if one of those buildings is going to be a solar, you could actually just do all 3 mexes before the solar. If you try to do wind after all 3, you will stall for a little bit, unless you're walking quite a distance. So just, you know, a minor little thing here if you wanted to be a little bit more efficient with that. Also note air labs do cost a lot of energy. So you might need some more energy right away after this lab is done, but that's pretty normal too, to just add on a bunch of energy after the lab. So I'm gonna speed up just a little bit. Whoop, that was a little too fast. A little bit too fast. Alright, so now you're adding on your energy, you're getting a fighter right away. Personally, I think here, starting with a scout is actually a little bit better because you know, you want to know what your opponents are doing, and if you're able to see this area for your frontline people, they can see like where the enemy commanders are and things like that. It's not as big of a deal in this kind of lobby, but in higher end lobbies, it's definitely can help a lot to just show like, oh, okay, this is where the enemy commanders are that are moving forward and stuff like that. Alright, so your first fighter's out. Just kind of chilling. You're assisting the lab now after you built on some extra winds. Note, wind is quite high on this map, so you do want to prioritize it and eventually reclaim your solars. That'll just get you that metal back because solars are just so inefficient when it comes to metal. And so any chance you get to reclaim these is very good. Assuming that you need metal, you know, and eventually you should need metal, so. Okay, so you do build a scout. I don't mind this timing either. You know, if you feel like there isn't really that much to know that early on, it's fine to do other stuff. Let's just kind of around. You see the geos being taken. See some building. Yeah, so you got to see. Well, I don't know. I guess this player kind of saw where the commander was, but you got to see where that player was, which is very important because obviously, you know, this is kind of like a, you know, a position where they can do all sorts of different things. You know, so knowing when they start moving out to grab their shipyard, if they even plan to, you know, is pretty important. But yeah, scouting around, seeing all the back players, very good. So you see that player moving in the tides. And by the way, for anybody out there watching that play this kind of position, on this map, with how the costs are, wind is actually technically better than tide. Now, obviously, wind does have some flux, so and tide is going to be more efficient than solar for sure on this map. But wind is actually a little bit better because wind is so much cheaper in a way. But if you're trying to get a lot of energy very quickly, tide is okay. It's just it's not quite efficient in terms of metal cost. It is more efficient in terms of build time, but if you have time, then wind is better. Anyways, very minor things to point out. Alright, so you're building... Okay, so you whoops, wrong buttons, lots of wrong buttons. Okay, so you got a bomber out. So this is an interesting play. Usually I would recommend, I mean, not that this is not bad, because they might not have any anti-air at all, which looks like they don't, so this is actually quite nice. Very, very good there. And okay, so you know what you're doing. This is, you know, you scouted, you know where the buildings are, now you're bombing the buildings, but you're not like sitting there, you know, just waiting on one person and destroying one person. It's like you're moving around because that one person's eventually going to get anti-air. And so it's kind of better to mix it up and go to where the anti-air isn't. Very good. Nice little bombing micro there. Yeah, destroying all this initial wins. Oh, so good. So very good. So what are you doing back at home? Okay, so you're adding some stuff on. Unfortunately, your lab's idle here. Fighters could be added on, but obviously bombers take a lot of micro, so I can understand, you know, that being forgotten a little bit. All right, so the bomber finally goes down. Let's see, did you actually kill that? Yes, you did. Yes, you did. Yeah, so that definitely worked out. Little stuff like that definitely helps out a lot. Usually the opposing air player would have something against that. They'd have some fighters and should be responding to that, but as it is, it worked out really well. But yeah, one bomber, I don't mind anyone trying something like that with one bomber. You know, it's not like a gigantic investment or anything like that. Nice, T2's done. Awesome, so you're able to greed for some economy here with that nice fast T2. Let's see, so you're just adding on wins. Grab those mexes. Yeah, I suppose this is fine. You have the money for it, so I mean, you might as well get both. This kind of feels like a lot, but let's see how it pans out. Yeah, I'd say this is just kind of a lot all at once. I'd go for maybe like 2 here. And then, yeah, at this point is when you'd want to eat these solar collectors. Because that'd be 300 metal that you could put towards getting this faster. So, yeah, basically when your T2 arrives and you start upgrading mexes, you want to put absolutely everything into those mexes to get them as soon as humanly possible. Because they are just, you know, they're 4 times stronger, so having them is awesome. Especially when you only have 3 mexes to work with. Oh, you could have grabbed this a little sooner, by the way. Yeah, like this should, like, tier 1 mexes are very important to get. It doesn't seem like a lot, but, you know, that's a fourth mex when you only have 3 right now. Yeah, it's doing some building. Just to also note, another way you could play this, not that you have to, is you could open bot lab and get some T1 bots out, or constructor bots out, and then build your lab. And that's mostly because construction aircraft take much longer to build. And then, you know, they also have less build power, so it's kind of like, you know, it's just like it'd be a little bit more efficient in terms of just gaining some extra build power earlier on. That'll just help you build your wins a little bit faster. But I don't mind this play either because you did that nice early scout and that nice early bombing run. And then you even had a fighter out to contest any bombing that happened from the opposite side, so it's definitely a give or take kind of thing. Definitely don't mind you doing that. Yeah. Yeah, so the way I would do this is I would grab maybe 2 mexes as I'm upgrading my first, or I mean, I'm sorry, 2 consorts as I'm upgrading my first mex, and as the second one finishes, I'd probably add on, you know, like say like 3 more, and as the third one finishes, maybe add on like 2 more or 3 more, and then start grabbing this one. Also notes, I mean, your energy's doing okay. If you had a little bit more energy, it would work out a little bit better with those extra con turrets. But this looks pretty okay so far. In some cases, it's like you might want to get a fusion before your 4th mex upgrade. But this is working out alright so far. Alright, cool. So I like the fact that you're greeting for more economy. Now I say that and it's like you're not building units here. This, I would say, a little bit early. I feel like you could actually greet a little bit sooner. So one thing to note when it comes to fighters. So when it comes to a fighter versus fighter battle, all fighters die against other fighters in 1 or 2 hits. T2 units generally, I mean, they take 2 hits basically from any tier 1 stuff, and tier 1 stuff basically just dies in 1 hit almost no matter what. So when it comes to fighter on fighter battles, it's actually more efficient even for Cortex. A lot of people say, oh yeah, it's more efficient for Armada, but even for Cortex it's more efficient. The reason being is it's not about the whole like, well, one T2 fighter is equivalent to 2 T2 fighters, but then, you know, the Armada T2 you know, is a little bit more expensive for what it is. It's not as strong, and so you might as well get more T1 fighters when it's Armada, right? And that's kind of the idea with that. And Cortex, you know, it's like 2 T1 fighters is more expensive than 1 T2 fighter. You know, so people often look at it as a T1 fighter, or T1 Cortex fighters are worse than T2 fighters, right? But actually, if you think about it, you know, 2 T1 fighters kill 1 T2 fighter, and 1 T2 fighter in that time will shoot once, killing only 1 of those T2 fighters. So if you pair up, you know, if you have 2 T1 fighters fighting 1 T2 fighter, the 2 T1 fighters will kill the T1 fighter, or I'm sorry, the T2 fighter, and the T2 fighter will only be able to shoot once, killing only 1 of those fighters. So it's in a way, it's like 1 of those T1 fighters lives, so it's actually more beneficial to have T1 fighters in that kind of an exchange. I mean, a lot of it comes down to micro, actually, so I mean, that's not always the result, especially as the air battles get really, really big. But something to keep in mind. So T1 fighters are actually still quite good, even for Cortex. Not saying that that's why you're getting a T2 lab, but I'm just saying, you know, since you are, I thought I'd mention it, type of thing. Let's see. So I would actually say here, you know, instead of getting this, I mean, maybe you're getting it for a bombing run. You're trying to get that out ASAP with T2 fighters and stuff like that, or I'm sorry, T2 bombers. So that would make sense in that case, and we'll see what you do. But I think personally, they're going to cost a lot of energy, so I feel like you might as well grab this first. Especially since then for sure you can start eating these solar collectors and get that 300 metal back. But yeah, I'm curious to see what you do here with the T2 thing here. Okay, so you're getting T2 construction aircraft. I would definitely say it's too early for that, and you don't really need 2 of them. If you're strictly talking about, you know, trying to add on build powers, oh, okay, I guess you're giving them out, so never mind. That's kind of fine. I forget about that aspect sometimes, especially to the C player. It is kind of important. Can I actually click this, please? Yeah, so they can't build underwater mexes. I always forget if they can or can't. Okay, so you're upgrading. Okay, okay. My apologies. I missed the fact that you have the island out here. Usually this goes to the C player, so I didn't even think to check it. But yeah, so you can upgrade these mexes for sure. Let's see, you got a radar here, anti-air, anti-ground. Okay, yeah, it looks pretty good out here. Yeah, so I suppose just like as a general statement, you kind of want either this or this. And by trying to do both, trying to produce like, first of all, building the T2 lab, takes a lot of time and energy and build power and all that. And then, building a fusion, same thing. It's kind of like a lot of time, of effort, and money that goes into it. And so it's kind of better to try to get just one thing at do one thing at a time, so that all the build power and all the resources go into just one of them. And that'll just help you do that one thing faster and sooner, which will propel doing other things faster and sooner, assuming it's like economy and stuff like that. So, and in this case, you are doing more economic stuff with both of these things. So while, yeah, it's good to get the metal and good to get the fusion, prioritizing just one or the other, I think would help you out a little bit better here. Since your energy is okay, like it's gonna start being a problem, I would say try to send these constructors with your T2 out here, just to get this mech faster, or get all three of these mechs faster. But I suppose you're slow building with that lab, so it's really not that big a deal. And the fusion comes out pretty fast as it is. And by the way, while you do this, you can reclaim this T1 lab just to get that bit of metal boost. Yeah, I mean, I suppose you don't. Well, you mainly need the energy actually. Now that you have all these things being upgraded. So yeah, I suppose usually it would so. I'm not as used to looking at economy in terms of airplay, so it's like I don't really quite 100% know, if you would need the fusion or if you would need the metal. And it kind of looked like you needed the metal. But now that this stuff's done, it's pretty clear to me that you actually need the energy. And I believe you were fine on energy because of the overflow your teammates were giving you. Because wind is actually quite nice right now, so it's not the wind. And I guess it is also the fact that your slider's all the way down, so you're converting as much of it as you can. But yeah, usually I would say get this first, and then this. Yeah. Yeah, those maxes out there are just taking a while. Alright, is that anti-nuke? Good time for that. You got your countermeasures here. And I suppose, you're just relying on fighters for anti-air. By the way, when you put down an anti-nuke, it would be a better position to put here, or around this area, so that it covers more players. Now, obviously, you want to protect, all your stuff. You don't want you wouldn't want the circle to be like this or something, because this is a vulnerability and they could obviously still nuke here. So you want to try to position it so it benefits as many players as possible, though. So if we take our anti-nuke out here and see the radius, I would put it maybe somewhere around here. So that way it fully benefits you, it fully benefits green, and you also provide a little bit of coverage for down here as well. Now obviously that's away from where build power is, so yeah, it's it's going to take a little longer to build, but you do have some some T1 constructors that can help you build it. Alright, so you are getting T2 fighters. T2 fighters are better against things like bombers. What I was saying before only goes with fighter on fighter battles. So just something to keep in mind. So personally, I do like a mix here of maybe doing a little bit of both. And then if you can, I would suggest doing some scouting too. You might not be able to see everything all the time, but getting as much information as you can is pretty important. And T2 fighter or T2 scouts have that radar and sonar. You know, so if you're able to like kind of swing them in this way, whoops, you know, like that, or even like, whoops, gosh, drawing is hard. Okay, well, you can swing them in, you know, like this, like I was just saying. Ah, the label thing. But you could also do something like, you know, a quicker bit like this and then move down. What I personally suggest is trying to have like, you know, more than one scout just like go out at once. You know, send them to various locations to just get as much information as you can. And that will just tell you how their fighter screen is doing, you know, compared to yours. And if you see them having a lot more fighters than you do, then there's a good chance that they didn't greet as hard. So you're in a way in a better position for later, but they're in a better position now. So getting that intel can, you know, can help you decide what to do a lot better. So you pause that one. Okay, so you got both of them paused. What are you spending on? Not 100% sure what you're up to right now. Oh, okay, you're just like building down here as well. I didn't even see that you had this one as well. Damn, both islands. Alright, so now you're producing T2 fighters. Yeah, as an air player, you should try to. I know I have a hard time like remembering to look at chat, but you know, if people request a scout, you know, trying to oblige because it can be kind of important. Like here, it would have been pretty important for light green to be able to see this stuff here. Oh, oh man, I'm so bad right now. I didn't even realize that it was from yellow that was asking for the scout. But either way, yeah, it would have been nice for light green to get some information on that. If you do an air scout, you know, you can do things like ping, you know, things that are abnormal or things that might be threatening. You know, if you had by chance scouted around this time, you could have scouted yellow and seen like a bunch of hovercraft and then just pinged it and made note of like lots of hover here or something, you know, and then hopefully your seat player would be like, oh, okay, that's what's up, you know, and make proper adjustments based on that. Communication and scouting and getting information is very, very key. Because yeah, that will just help you make decisions on what to do. So as a backlighter, obviously you don't have to, you know, stay with purely being the air guy. You can do other stuff. You know, one of the main things is for you to cover, you know, the anti-air if you can. But as the game gets later and later, it's up to the backliner to try to decide, okay, what can I do to end the game? You know, what are some key things that my team needs right now that I can maybe provide? And again, your main role is kind of being like the anti-air, so like, you know, watching the minimap and seeing, you know, where are the air threats and all that, very important. But you know, trying to make a decision on what to do with an end game kind of thing. Let's see. So yeah, anytime that you don't use something like this lab hasn't been used for quite a while, just reclaim it and get the money back. And again, like your metal is sitting high because you don't quite have the energy. So you would want to, you know, try to prioritize fixing that energy. Like here, it wouldn't be bad to get like a second fusion. And if you're really trying to greed for it, you could get an Aphis or something like that. I'm glad that you got pinpointers. That's looking out for your team for sure. But yeah, you have, you know, these solars basically do nothing right now, so you might as well get rid of those. The lab hasn't done anything, so you might as well get rid of that. Reclaiming something returns, assuming that it's living, it returns 100% of the metal cost. It doesn't return any energy, but it's 100% of the metal cost. So you can effectively just switch labs and stuff like for free. And having that bit of metal from this lab or from these solars could have propelled your early game a bit more into having more economy at this point. But yeah, just having it sit there and do nothing means it could have been pushed into something. One thing to note is in bar, the way the resources work and gather and all that, like let's just talk about energy here as an example. So the way it works is per second, the energy gain happens, right? So you get like a plus amount of energy, and then it's taken away for the building stuff, if it can. And so you see it go up and then it comes down, and it goes up and it comes down. Basically, is like what keeps happening. So your energy gain is your energy, although it looks like it's going up, is actually stalling right now because you have way more, minus energy than you do plus energy. And as stuff turns on and off in terms of building, this minus number fluctuates a bit too, and that just has to do with having something on lower or higher priority. So with lower priority, or I should say with higher priority, it's just taken out right after it's gained. With lower priority, it waits for the higher priority stuff to go first, and then takes it out. So if it can't take it out, it just won't. If you don't have any energy, it just won't like take it out at all. So you will see that minus number fluctuate as certain, some of these build turrets like turn on and off because some of them are on low priority, or I should say all of them are defaulted to low priority. Alright, so you do start that Aphis. And now that you stop building air, your energy is now okay for now. Yeah. Yeah, I don't mind the fact that you added on a bunch of fighters here, by any means. I just feel like it was done slightly inefficiently because you didn't quite have the energy for it. And yeah, I would say for an air player, it's like you'll hear these numbers, right, with fusions and advanced fusions. Like basically it's, you get 2 converters per fusion, and you get 4 converters per advanced fusion. And that's not always true. While that's like a reasonable rule of thumb. By the way, it's 2 converters is a little bit extra. I mean, it supports more than a fusion, so like it kind of relies on some of these wins a bit, since converters take 600 per second and the fusion for Cortex provides 1100. So there's like 100 extra energy that has to be taken out somewhere else for these for the second converter to be used. Aphis, it is like actually like 5, but generally you want 4 because you need extra energy elsewhere. But the thing is, for the air players, aircraft requires quite a lot of energy, and so just having that same ratio doesn't quite work out. And given how many metal extractors you got, because metal extractors do take some extra energy at tier 2, trying to build air and having the metal extractors and all that, you may want just some extra energy lying around. And so I would actually say for this fusion, maybe just get one of these converters and not build the second one, because air takes so much extra energy. And even now that you have this Aphis, like you're still actually using a lot of energy. So here I would consider maybe even just building 1 or 2 after this Aphis. I mean, ultimately it's like you want to base it on what you actually have coming in. And then of course it varies a bit because of wind speed and all that, so I mean, there's other factors to take into consideration. Yeah, so just to note what I was just a little bit back on what I was just talking about. So here, advanced fusions build, or they make 3000 energy. You know, considering that each of these converters is 600 each, that means you really can only support 5 of these. 6 is kind of like if there's excess, I suppose, coming from other teammates, which there isn't. So you didn't really quite need this either. And so you could put that metal and stuff towards getting other stuff a little bit faster. Small efficiency things here. But yeah, we are starting to get into that later points in the game, and so I think it's a good time to start thinking about, you know, things that you can do in this later stage. I think as the air player, one of the most important things that you could possibly do is scout. You know, and those scouts might just die right away and not really see much, but they are also very inexpensive. For T2 Scout, it's only 180, and that's with like you know, they have a radar, they even have a sonar, so you can actually see like, you know, stuff under the water, which is a great benefit. Now note the sonar range is a lot less than like the radar range, but it's still something and it's still noteworthy. Even the T2 sonar does not really see that far, so you know, it's good to, you know, it's something. Something's always better than nothing. It's just kind of hard to see stuff underwater. But yeah, as much information as you can gather, the better. You know, if you're able to see bases and stuff, then you can know where the anti-nukes are, and players can plan for that if they plan to do like a nuke kind of thing. If they don't, I mean, it also just gives them intel on like where the defenses are. You know, so that can be very critical as well. So yeah, I guess the main thing is just getting information so that you can figure out what to do. And so with that information, you'll be able to figure out what is the best plan here. Also note, you have one C player that is completely dominating, has very good vision of generally, you know, this area. You know, the player on this side is forced into a very defensive land situation. So you have all this to work with, basically. This side isn't doing quite as well, but there is no enemy seed player here anymore. You know, some of their stuff got taken out by the hovers, and now, you know, it looks like they're trying to rebuild. But yeah, so this is fairly open as well. So it looks like, you know, obviously green's coming in here with some marauders to do some damage, which is a very reasonable choice, especially on this map around this time. Alright, so lots of snipers. So yeah, like I was saying, it's good to have that information, and so anytime you see, you know, yeah, anytime you see an opponent or see an ally try to go into an enemy's base, you know, try to just look around and see like, okay, what are those players doing? And seeing, okay, what are some potential, you know, ways I can get around their defenses and deal some damage. You know, and in some cases they'll just be like, okay, this is not a place to attack because there's just so much to defend. That's not always easy to figure out exactly what the counterplay is. I mean, here specifically, if you were to see this, you know, obviously you see some snipers, you see some enemy marauders, you know, you see that there's some air units. And I would say that this isn't really a good, clear indication of how many fighters there are here. So I'll try to get that information as well. You know, when I say scouting, you know, it's sort of like, you know, enemy fighters will meet it and, you know, take out as many fighters, or take out the scouts as they can. But at the very least, then you get an idea, a good sense of how many fighters they have, right? So then you can decide like, okay, I can match their fighters, or I can exceed their fighters, and then add on some extra bombers. And then with that, you can actually do some bombing runs, even if they're, you know, it's sort of like it's good to force an attack or what am I saying? Like you can feign an attack in one location with fighters, like just position them somewhere threatening, and then bomb somewhere else, or you could bomb with the fighter screen kind of in front of it. But that usually makes it a little bit easier for the enemy to realize like, oh, there's, you know, bombers coming, because they're already looking at the fighter engagements. So one of the things that you can do as an air player, if you're trying to stay with air, is, you know, to basically, you know, you could, for example, send your fighters out here. I mean, obviously away from ground to anti-air and stuff like that. Try to engage their fighters, and then you also send a bombing run with it. So you could do it this way, or you could do something like, you know, again, to use this as an example spot, you know, send your fighters here and try to engage with their fighters without running into too much anti-air from the ground, and send your bombers in this way. And then they'll be distracted over here with these fighters, and your bombers come attack this way. If their fighters engage, or if their fighters like go out of the engagement with your fighters and go after your bombers, it'd be kind of difficult too because you don't really know what the anti-air situation is. But let's say that there isn't much anti-air from the ground because you scouted it. Then your fighters could chase after their fighters. And basically with how fighters work, they only attack in front of them. So if they're being chased, they can't like fire backwards, you know, so like you could potentially pick off some extra fighters, especially if you're able to like cut them off. Like say you engage the enemy here. The enemy, you know, goes up here to respond to bombers. And then you have some extra fighters or something here to cut them off here, basically. You know, that way you're you know, engaging the fighters from an angle where they will be facing in this direction and yours will be facing in this direction, which ultimately means your guys can attack, you know, shoot these guys down. These guys, they can't attack backwards because that's just not how it works. They'll have to turn around to engage back. So they can lose a lot of extra fighters that way. And then if they do go after the bombers, you can move some bombers out and I don't know, you could even do something like have another group of fighters to come defend those as they try to run out if they do get engaged. I don't know, it gets complicated, it gets tricky, but these are things that you know, just like little tactical things that you can do with fighters and bombers and stuff like that. Yeah, so that'd be like the fighter bomber angle. Let's unpause and build a bit further down the road. Now, if you feel comfortable with the anti-air, but you don't feel comfortable with bombing, that's, you know, you don't have to do bombing, but I would say, you know, eventually switch into something else. And so I'll talk about more of those options in a minute here. You know, there are options. I think you mentioned you go T3 eventually, which is a great option. The only problem is a lot of T3 kind of need to go down this angle, but notes that some of them, I mean most of them are actually can walk in the water. They can't shoot in the water, but they can walk in the water, which means, you know, it's not just marauders that can attack this beachhead. You can actually send titans, or you can send juggernauts, or, you know, there's all sorts of things you can do down there. And in that way, and then there's like the hovercraft one that actually wouldn't be too bad here either. But yeah, you could potentially attack this beachhead. There's other plays like you could do amphibious stuff on this gigantic coast. And as the air player, you kind of have the benefit of, like if you keep your air lab, that is, you know, you have the benefit of, you know, you can make a scout and see what's there at the time before you actually send them in. See anything going up yet? No. Okay, this is good. I like the amounts of build power you're adding on per factory. I oftentimes see people build a lot of air factories and not much consulates, but this is actually how it should be done. What the heck are these things? Okay, those are the lunkheads. Yeah, bombers, by the way, don't need to always be used on bases either. You can do, like, I saw that you actually know how to micro bombers, so like you could actually bomb some of these things too. Now granted, there's probably some anti-air, Or actually, I forget if platypus have ground to air. Yeah, they do have some anti, but uh, it's gonna be pretty light. You know, it's not like the strongest anti-air ever, so like you could still potentially bomb this. Lunkheads, I think they do have. No, they do not have anti-air whatsoever, so you could actually bomb these guys a bit, even if it just softens them up a little bit. You know, for your allies. Looks like you have chosen to go with wasps, which are a great choice as well. Gunships do a little bit better against units like this, you know, so not too bad. Ooh, big marauder push down here too. Jesus. Lots of mines though. Lots of mines. That's good on your ally, Big Sean 2000. It's a smart play to get some mines down here for sure. A little zappity zap zap. Alright. So yeah, you got a lot of wasps. Which is good. You're able to defend with them quite well, quite nicely. Yeah, I guess I just look at this like I feel like if you scout and know how much anti-air they have, you could potentially do a lot there with either the gunships or bombers or whatever. And you've done your economy fairly well here, so I would think that you'd be ahead of the other air player. So yeah, this is kind of a big deal. Sheesh. What a raid. So many grunts. So here comes the gunships. Wow, so gunships and sprinters. And a big push up at the top here with these platypus. Almost called them pelicans, thinking of the old Total Annihilation names. Yeah, it's a little odd. I don't know if about sending platypus up the center here. You might as well use them for what they're intended, because they're not going to be very good at a normal fight. Oh, even some ducks here taking out the ships here. That was a really nice push from the enemy team. Looks like green just came online with his grunt spam. Grunt spam, very good, very good. So yeah, definitely at this point. Yeah. So I'll say it this way, just to like reiterate on what I've been talking about, just to state it a little bit differently. So when it comes to airplay, and as you get more fighters on, it's good to have more fighters, but if you don't know how many fighters they have, you don't know when to stop fighters, you don't know, if enough is enough, and you don't know if you can possibly switch into something else. So I would say, that's probably the biggest takeaway for me, at least so far, is just to do more scouting to see what kind of anti-air is there. Is there ground anti-air? Is there a lot of fighters? Is there, a few fighters? Like you have a nice clump here of fighters, so you could actually do quite a bit with those. And if the enemy's reliance on just fighters, and there's not much anti-air, then there's definitely some bombing plays that you could do potentially. Again, or wasps. Or if you feel like there is a lot of anti-air on the grounds, or that you can't, that you're not really going to be able to break their fighters because it's just so thick or something, you can just switch out of all this together and say like, okay, I think I have enough to defend, but I don't think I have enough to attack. Let's maybe switch into something else at this point. And I feel like this is kind of a good time to like, consider that. Whereas, I guess the other play would be to like greed for more economy type of thing. But it's kind of however you want to play it, because there's so many options and so many things can work. But knowing exactly what will work in a given situation gets a little tricky. and you know, to get that information, scouting is very important. It'll help you get that intel. Um, yeah, I think it's easy to kind of fall into the trap of like, well, they got fighters, so like, why would I scout? They're just gonna, you know, the scouts are just going to get killed off. But ultimately, you know, especially if you have a little bit of micro with those scouts, you can avoid a lot of anti-air. You know, avoid some of those you know, enemy fighters. And then even if you don't get very far in the enemy base, you should at least get a grasp of the fighter count that way. So yeah, you could definitely go T3 at this point. You could do like platypus plays, you could do duck plays, you could do amphibious tank plays. You know, you could also support the front by having some things. I mean, at this point, I'd recommend things more like snipers or mammoths or something like that if you're going to go T2. You know, something that hits heavy and has a little bit more sustained. But also just massing like other stuff like fiends can actually be good too. Just push down here. So my advice is basically to try stuff out, and you know, first and foremost scout so that you can get the intel to figure out what you want to go with, and then two, you know, it's kind of like try stuff out and see what works in different situations. And I think one of the greatest things as a backliner is you have the choice to choose different routes. And you can kind of just say like, okay, I think I can do this in this situation. And then you get to just see if it works or not. And if it doesn't work, then you just try something else. Or maybe it doesn't work because you didn't have enough of those units. Or something, you know, it's like, or maybe it mostly works, like you destroy the defenses, but it doesn't actually damage much. You know, then maybe it's like, maybe I'll just try that again with some extra units, or with a heavier force or something. But yeah, the choice is ultimately yours as to what to do. Yeah, I think this is kind of hard right now because there isn't a lot of T3 to help defend here. We got some Razorbacks from purple, but it's a lot of spam. And ultimately, I feel like, yeah, having some big juicy units to defend this area is actually what your team needs at the moment. And again, I can't really go off of what your opponents are doing because there's no scouting to know if there's any vulnerabilities. But yeah, just looking at the front here, I mean, it's doing okay. It's holding them off. Okay, here's a little bit of scouting. We get to see a bunch of marauders, some snipers, and all these starlights here. Alright, so you got some grunts coming out. Okay, so you decide to go spam and T3. Okay, this is a good choice too. This is like a good default if you don't know what's going on. Like spam, you know, it's pretty useful overall, and pairing it with T3 is quite nice. Alright, I'm going to speed up a bit. There's not as much to talk about at this point. Nice play over here. So one of the things that's also very important is just like the communication between teammates. You know, when the enemy came in with you know, that big surge of grunts and stuff, and they also hit C with platypus, and then there's also some ducks there, and then like I think there was a big marauder push up here around the same time. Like that's all coordinated, you know, and doing it all together like that tests all the defenses at once, so that if someone, you know, it makes it harder because they can't just all respond to one threat. They have to respond to all these different threats simultaneously. So, you know, doing it together is very important, and can you know, make or break it. So, you know, just trying to communicate what you're doing, what the play could be as a team or as a collective. It's kind of, I need to just check. I feel like I should just check what the anti-air is on their side. Alright, so wait, what are these? These are shredders that are patrolling? Is that right? Wow. Okay, that's different. I'm not used to seeing something like that. That's very unique. Um, but yeah, there actually isn't a ton of fighters here, but there is a lot of shredders here. So I don't know. It's hard for me to gauge. Oh, there's like a ton of anti-air here now. Yeah, so it's definitely good that you're switching out of anti-air or switching out of air, more or less. Yeah, and at this point, your economy is strong enough that like it's fine that you leave some factories around that are idle because if you really need it, you can just switch them on real quick. And they're really, when you're getting, you know, like between 300 and 500 metal income per second, these labs are peanuts, so I don't mind that at all. Very heavy spam from you. That's quite nice. So red comes up here through marauders. Let's see, yeah, you respawn with your gunships. Very good. And one of the things that is oftentimes overlooked too is, you kind of. I think it's easy to get in the mindset of like, okay, this player, they control that C. This player, they control that C. I don't need to worry about it, and just don't even think about C at all. But actually, even if another player controls it, it might be useful still to help them out or to do a C play for yourself. Because in some situations, it's like, a player could control the C and just not do things like battleships or um, missile cruisers or flagships or things with like longer range that could potentially barrage the enemy are very good plays to do, and it usually comes out of the C player, but they don't always either A, think of it, or B, maybe they're busy just building on their economy still, or something like that. Maybe they're just busy doing stuff. Um, so I guess what I'm saying is I wouldn't mind it, and I think it'd be a reasonable play for you to start your own shipyard. Get a T2 shipyard out, have like a bunch of air cons to push that quickly, right? And then push out um, like a couple of flagships or I should say and or missile cruisers um, to just kind of barrage the place, because those are actually very important for Supreme Strait. The more damage you're able to do with that, the better. And then of course, if you guys are able to keep the sea, and ideally if you're spending a lot of money into flagships and stuff, you want to keep the sea. Um, but then you'd be out here, right? And you'd have some intel of the area. Um, and one of the great things to pair with things like missile cruisers or flagships is a carrier, actually, because carriers have very, very big line of sight. They're also anti-nuke for your flagships and stuff. Um, but mainly, to me, their main thing is their line of sight is huge. And then they also have some radar for themselves as well. Um, so you'd want to do things like, pairing those flagships or missile cruisers with a carrier and a jammer. A carrier for line of sight and radar, and the jammer to jam it so that they can't see you. Um, and then you can see targets that way pretty easily and see where their base is, either through the radar or the line of sight itself. Um, I would actually not suggest it as much on this side. I'd prefer it on this C side, and that's mainly because this is such a long coast. There's so much you can do with it, whereas this blocks line of sight and radar. So it's a little bit harder to do stuff here. Um, but yeah, this side can actually like potentially hit this player and this player and this player, the stuff over here, and the stuff back here. I don't think it gets as far as this player, but maybe if you really hug the coast. It's been a while since I've made a flagship on Supreme Strait, so I hope you forgive me for not remembering. Um, but yeah, that is definitely a play that would be useful, or even just like trying to get this player back on their feet, build them up a bunch of stuff. Um, And just having like radar and sonar in this region to help support that kind of, long range play like that. LRPCs are a good medium stepping stone before getting something like a Calamity. Obviously, green's getting a Calamity. Right, that's greens. Yeah, that's greens. Um, which, by the way, you could help support if you'd like to with your, um, air cons. But yeah, I mean, like I was saying, the choice is ultimately yours. But this is oftentimes something that helps end the game on this kind of map. Um, other things like you could build some anti-air for your fellow frontline guys here, in the form of flag cannons and stuff like that. You could help put down some shield towers and do more of a support role. You don't necessarily need to be the big time attacker aggressive guy. So there are other options like that too. Obviously you got the pinpointers, so that's very helpful. Yeah, especially at this time, like things do turn into a slugfest on this map, as everyone just gets like a super economy, and then everyone's trying to push everything down this narrow little area. So there's, there's not too much tactics in that. So I usually suggest trying to look elsewhere at the same time for other potential weaknesses. But yeah, as I checked, like, they got tons of anti-air and tons of defenses, so like, there really isn't that much you can do here. But the most important thing is to scout it, to see that you can't do anything there. I like to stress the scouting part because it is, to me, very crucial and easily forgotten or not fully realized how important it is. So I try to hammer that in. Right, so Calamity's going to be done. So the important thing with Calamities, and I know it's not yours to control, but for anybody out there, the important thing is, like while they can be useful, like shooting at things like this Juggernaut and stuff, and in this case, if the Calamity is done or when it gets done, or it just got done, I guess, it is good to take this out because obviously there isn't a lot of other stuff to take the Jug out, and you kind of need to take it out. But eventually you do want it to fire directly on bases, wreck as much economy as you can. And oftentimes, like if they're just spamming grunts or something like that, the Calamity will automatically just fire on the stuff nearby. Fire on those grunts, and that's not terribly useful. It'd be more useful to use it for longer range targets when possible. Juggernauts. Okay, so it looks like there is some targeting. That is, yeah, I wonder where it's actually firing. I'm gonna have to click on green. Okay, where are you shooting, sir? You are shooting. Gosh, where is it even targeting? Oh, it's targeting over here now, that's why. Okay, so this is good. Glad to see green's doing that. Yeah, I mentioned the Jug because I don't know if there's a lot of other stuff to actually stop this Jug here. Looks like blue does have a commander in position, so that is something for sure. So I suppose it's not anything to worry about too hard. Yeah, if you're not, I guess just put some numbers out there for people too. It takes like 6 advanced fusions and converters, well, 6 advanced fusions to support the firing of a Calamity or not Basilisk. What's the other one? Ragnarok. Um, it takes around 6. I mean, you'd probably want 7 so that you can also do other stuff with that energy because at 6 it'll basically use up 6 advanced fusions. And so it's kind of at a point where you could also get a Calamity actually. Green could basically get a second Calamity. Looks like Green's opting to get more T3 here as well. And yeah, as for these other players, it seems like they're just trying to help out whatever they can. Green's rebuilding. It's got some snipers. Lots of mines here. This is quite nice. This will definitely deter a lot of T3, or I should say weaker T3. It won't deter a Jug too much, but kind of glad to see that kind of transition in the meta for Supreme Strait. These mines are OP. Alright, let's just see what kind of damage is happening. Yeah. So pretty good damage overall. I mean, some damage here, obviously some damage here. Maybe I guess I don't really know how many things actually exploded up here. I mean, I don't see like a bunch of little craters, so I guess not too much, but reasonable target nevertheless. But yeah, trying to find the targets very important. And again, having like having a scout can help with that. So, or not a scout, but like lots of scouts. Of course, ideally before they get a bunch of anti-air up, So doing it throughout the game is very important, so that once their anti-air gets up and you can't really get in there anymore, you still have the prior information to work on, so that at least it's something. And then when this Ragnarok comes up, then all of a sudden they know where to hit. One of the things that is oftentimes overlooked, people think of spam like, get T1 spam and just run down the center. On a lot of maps, it's quite good to have some spam, but there's a lot of different places you can put the spam. So it makes it even more valuable in a way because you can direct it in all these different ways pretty easily. At Supreme Strait, obviously there's this one choke, right? I mean, that's just where the spam has to go for T1, but not necessarily. You can also do things like spam hovercraft. So hovercraft obviously can go all over the water and on land. So what you could do is potentially build up a large hovercraft force, say like back here or something. You can get like, I don't know, like 200, 300, just cheap hovercraft or something. Or maybe you mix in like a bunch of different types of hovercraft, because at this point they're pretty cheap for a lot of stuff. But you just build up a gigantic ball and then just send them through. And then you support it with, all the new hovercraft that come in, you also send down here. So then there's a big chain of hovercraft coming down with the ball. The ball, of course, is the surprise moments of like, hey, here I am. Now, obviously, mines have become a big part of the meta here, apparently, which is great because they're really good to have. So you might expect some mines. So as you get up here, you might want to not commit absolutely all your hovercraft, but just enough to walk over the mines and clear them. Actually, I don't even know if hovercraft set off mines now that I think about it. It's not something I would usually see, so I'll have to test that and find out. But yeah, just something to keep in mind. Or they could go down here. Obviously, there's a large beachhead here as well. But given that, there's usually a higher chance of defenses on this side. But yeah, just finding places to send spam hovercraft would be really good. I've seen it happen once on Supreme Strait, and it worked out really well. Like really well. It just completely surprised the guy. And then all of a sudden C was dead, and they just like ran up the coast and killed the back line. And it was pretty nuts. I have seen it on other maps, like 8 Horses, where there's that there's like this windy like river, and the rest of it's land, and a player just used the river as a hovercraft platform to quickly move across the map and then get into the back line. But as it is, your team's doing all right. You know, and in terms of airplay, okay, you are adding on bombers now. Interesting. Yeah, I don't particularly like this play, mostly because you haven't scouted. And we already know from this replay, because I had to, you know, I peeked because I couldn't help myself. We already know that there's like a ton of anti-air just all across this. Now as it is, like, you know, these bombers can take a few hits, so like, you know, might still do something, so we'll see. But then also at this point, like, a lot of the front has been killed off as well, so maybe there is a play where you just go down the middle, which is not usually something I would suggest on Supreme Strait, but that might work out here. Okay, so here you go. Lots of guys coming out. Lots and lots of stuff. I'm glad that you're pausing other production and focusing on one thing at a time. It's all very good. Oh, the anticipation's killing me though. I'm really curious to see how this works out. So you're adding on a bunch of scout guys too, radar planes. Gearing up for something. Here's that flagship play. This could have been so much sooner. Oh, flagships or battleships from the other side. Oh no, these are just cruisers actually. It's nice support for the flagship here. But yeah, this is okay. So this is like ultimately, you know, what I was talking about before, is one of the big time goals that can help win Supreme Strait. And you know, your guy over here had some you know, setbacks for sure, so just finally getting around to it. But yeah, as a backline player, don't feel like, oh, you know, don't feel like it's their turf. I'm not going to step on their grass. You know, they're doing the water. I won't touch it. You know, and just do whatever that is going to win. You know, because they got set back. They can't really, you know, get there as soon as maybe it would have been ideal. All right, so you're going in like this. Yeah, I mean, I suppose given how anti-air is, like, this kind of way of going in is okay. Let's see, bombers. Yeah. Oh, they are gonna get in. Somewhat. Get the APHIS. Oh, not quite on the APHIS, but I mean, it's some damage. No, that definitely sets them back because now they don't have build power and stuff. So kind of a big deal. Kind of a lot. It feels like not much in a way, but just taking out the build power alone is pretty significant. Because now it's gonna, you know, because build power is ultimately what's gonna make them build up slower again. So it'll take them more time to ramp up their production. And now there's a target for the Ragnarok, or the Calamity. Looks like there's still some bubbles left. Oh, so close to dead too. Periodically one gets in. Oh man, this is so close to like this APHIS dying. Oh no. Just has to skirt this one area. Just a little bit. Oh, there they go. Okay. That was more satisfying. I was hoping that would happen. Put it back to your guys' view. And now there's jugs coming out. Yeah. Let's see. Okay, nice response from light green here. Long range battle subs. I mean, just to have something that does some significant damage, you know, it's going to be a nice response. Also, just having vision for the flagship to attack it from a distance. Let's see, okay, so what do you got going on at this point? You're still doing the spam, or are you going back to spam a bit? Producing C3, still, okay, so you're doing just a mix. So I feel like at this point, a mix is fine. You know, you don't necessarily need to stick to one thing, or only do that one thing at a time, because your economy is just, you know, strong enough type of thing. Yeah, I mean, potentially you could put down your own calamity somewhere. Like if you're able to reclaim this, I don't even know what's over here at this point, or reclaim this, you could put a calamity there. Actually, I don't think this one would really reach anything. This one should be able to reach some stuff over here, or you could just put one, you know, right up here as well. I mean, I don't know if you can actually fit two up here, but you know, just somewhere on the front. Jesus, so many Thors. It's an interesting seeing platypus fighting a flagship is not something you see every day. I'd be slightly more concerned with this, but yeah, because that is quite a few Thors. This is only one flagship, and there's already bubbles for the flagship. Okay, you pushed out a jug. What are these builders working on? So they're guarding this guy's guarding that thing. Okay. So they're just assisting, I think. Huh. That's a little strange. I mean, usually when you tell aircons to guard another aircon, and that's guarded aircon is assisting a factory, all these would be assisting it as well. But apparently they're not, or it doesn't look like they are. So that might be a bug. Yeah, because these are all guarding that guy. Because usually when they're assisting, they start flying around it. So I don't know. This just looks odd. Doesn't look quite right. So there might be a bug there. So yeah, the game's pretty much won at this point. You know, I think you did a fair share of stuff. You know, you have your spam coming out at a very good rate. You got a good economy. You got your air flowing. You even produced some T3s to help out. So yeah, really nice job this game. And it looks like there's that Ragnarok I was talking about. Let's see, how far does that shoot from here? I'm quite curious. Okay, so it only hits the beach here, yeah, so that position for them is not as good as, say, this position. Would have been better for their Ragnarok, I think. But then again, there really isn't that much built here, so I don't know, maybe not. Maybe the front really is the only place you can put it. Yeah. Oof. Yeah, so this is exactly what not to do with fighters, or I guess with any unit. So basically, if the enemy has a wall of guys, right, like this, the worst thing that you could possibly do when you attack it is go in single file this way, because they'll have many guys here shooting here. What the heck? Why does my drawing get all screwed up like that? Shooting like this, you know, from all these different angles, and you only have like a few units here that are firing back. So then this guy dies, and then the next guy dies, and as they move in, they just all die one by one, and don't really deal much damage. So that's very inefficient in terms of battling. Um, so if there is a wall here, basically you want to look for the points. And I'll just mention this as a general thing. It's not really like in this situation, you basically just want another wall to fight it, or if possible, or darn it, let me draw this a little bit better. If possible, you actually want to swing in this way, because this is more of a point where they'll have less guys firing, and you want to not just swing in this way like single file, but instead, if their cluster's like this, you want your cluster to be like this, or like a cluster this way and tech this way. My apologies for the very crude drawings, but yeah, just like having more guys fight like that will be more efficient, type of thing. And that's true for ground units as well. Yeah, nice job taking that. At least taking out the the shields there. So now, other plasma stuff can attack back. Gosh, there's just so much anti-air over here. It's crazy. Now, ultimately, this is really solid defense for this section of the coast. But in a way, when the more defense you put into a position, the safer that position is, but the more unsafe other positions are, because you don't have like a mobile thing to get over to those other positions. So having this really strong here means now this is weaker here. And then you could say like, well, that player should handle that themselves. Well, if they put a bunch of defenses here, if every player plays like that, basically, this player defends this location, this player porks up this location really hard. You basically got defenses all the way down, but then all of a sudden, because there's so many defenses elsewhere, there's not as much stuff in the front compared to your opponent. Because you're spending more of your money on those defenses instead of on, attacking or on different positions, or even on something mobile to defend different locations. Just to point that out really quick for people in general. Gosh, the assaults on the Ragnarok on the hill, that's yeah, it's a tricky one. I mean, I don't know if anything really is going to be able to take this out. Not with the anti-air coverage like that. Yeah, at this point, like if you had all the vision in the world, or I guess you have enough vision just like looking at the front too. I mean, you have a ton of air, so I guess that's your play. I mean, I was kind of thinking the same thing, where it's like air is kind of your best bet here, in a way. Not to go this angle. This is this is lots of this is Pork City. Not from that angle, but like other angles would have been fine, I think. I just gotta take out their air. Let's engage a little bit here. Yeah. So much air on every side though. You are doing a lot with the spam. It may not kind of feel like it, but it is good support for sure. So yeah, just the fact that you have lots of anti-air, you're trying the bomber angle, you're getting the spam, the support front, you're actually doing a lot this game. Oops, clicked on the wrong player. Yeah. I mean, potentially you could greed for even more APHIS and get even more stuff going out, but I think at this point you're probably just trying to end the game because it's quite long already. This is that hard angle again. Got all that anti-air there. Yeah, I mean, one of the things that you could try doing is just building a nuke launcher. I mean, you can expect that there's going to be anti-nuke in the back, you know. So I would not try to nuke these locations unless you scout that there's no anti-nuke or something. You know, but there are, you know, like there's this frontal area that's being defended with all these, you know, all this stuff. Like a nuke could actually do a lot to the air units. And, you know, at this point, it's not really that expensive. So just as another option. I still like my hovercraft idea. I was talking about it earlier. Hovercraft spam could, I mean, hovercraft spam probably wouldn't break this, because this is just like, you know, so much Thor, so much, you know, pop-ups and all that. Like, you wouldn't really be able to attack that, but, you know, anywhere else, just like anywhere else. Like here's fairly vulnerable if it's like actually truly spammed. Even just coming in from like a weird angle like this can be helpful, because obviously the Thors can't be everywhere, so obviously they're here right now, so they can't be everywhere. But anyways, here's that big air battle. Jeez. Yeah, so you're just like doing a fight command, right? Yeah, I feel like you spaced it out pretty good. I think Brown just had more. You know, partly because you're spending money on spam and stuff, so I mean, you can't really expect to have as much as he does. And if you do, that's, you know, then you're way ahead of them. But this might be rough, because your team doesn't have as much anti-air. Yeah. Yeah, so these bombers could actually like do possibly some damage, sent it with the fighters. Yeah, you've already built up like a reasonable anti-air fleets again. It does get a little rough with two players going air. You know, that's something to be mindful of. And that makes it tricky for you, because you are kind of needed with the spam on the fronts in a way. Because without it, the enemy would just push up all the way up here and probably take out the Ragnarok. And, you know, so you can't really just afford to spend only on anti-air or on fighters. So I think you're doing a reasonable thing with that. But yeah, just having two dedicated air players at this point for them, it just puts a lot of strain on you to try to manage both. Let's see, income wise, it's brown and red, so that's 5. Yeah, that's like 8. 8 to your 5 or 6. Yeah, so yeah, it's a lot of money for them to put into air. So I mean, I guess if they don't use it, then it's kind of a benefit to you guys, for sure. I guess red gave all the oh no, red's anti-air is here. So many wrecks. Yeah, I was gonna say, one of the things that your team should be doing is getting some res balls together. So green's got that handled, it looks like. Yeah, a stack of Thors chasing this juggernaut. Slow moving battle. Juggernaut decides to stop and just explode on the Thors. That's reasonable. I'm gonna have to cut this a little short. Um, I don't have that much time to continue. But yeah, I hope I covered enough. I hope I gave some good insight for like scouting. That's really the main takeaway. If I'm gonna summarize this, I'd say scouting. Just do a lot of it throughout the match. Because the more intel you get before all the anti-air gets truly built up, the better. And it'll allow you to do things like see, how many fighters they have, and then you can make decisions of like, okay, I can maybe do a bombing run here if I engage their fighters and send in some bombers at the same time. And it gets harder to do that as the game progresses, because then everyone starts having super economy and just having anti-air all over the place, and then there's just like so many extra fighters that it's hard to even know if you're going to win the air battle. Okay, so Green decided to go air here as well, so that's good. But yeah, I love the fact that you went spam. I love the fact that you went C3. But there are other options, like the hovercraft thing, I think would be very helpful. And yeah, you could just try bombers again and again and stuff like that. Or you could build your own Ragnarok. Yeah, I mean, I guess that pretty much sums it up. There's always multiple angles. Like here, the hovercrafts are coming in, finally. Someone decides to do it. And there's walls at this point, so like this isn't going to do as much, but even so, like this smaller amounts of hovers, ideally you'd have even more coming out. They're getting pinched here, but like they're still kind of making it through. And this is only one area. They could also, come from other angles. Like the hovercrafts could potentially just like come down this way, attack this way or attack this way, all sorts of stuff. And yeah, just having a mindset of like, yeah, there's like lots of different things you can do, and it's really just up to you to figure out what it is. But I hope I gave you some ideas and things to work with. I know that this has been kind of a longer recording because I've wanted to kind of see how it plays out in the end here, since that's where most of your questions are. Just about how to finish the game sooner, basically. But yeah, I hope you learned something, and if you have any questions, let me know. Thanks for watching.